SEC West chaos. If I were to say to you, if I were to ask you, is the SEC West primed for chaos in 2023? What would your take be on that, Jake?
Well, I don't know if you can call last year really chaos, but not seeing Alabama win the West, I guess, is considered chaos now. But I think, Blayne, when you look at the conference from the top to the bottom, I think on the spectrum of who could do what, it's as wide open. To use the cliche, the Wild Wild West, it really is. It's as wide open as it has been since I can remember, and I think that's a great thing. We actually compared it to the Big Ten East this morning on the show. That there's no Rutgers in this division. There's no Indiana in this division. It's a really powerful division from the top to the bottom. I mean, it's hard to figure out who's going to be in the middle of it. And obviously, you got to start with Alabama. Even though LSU won the West last year in Brian Kelly's first year, the spectrum of where Alabama could finish, I think, is wider. I think it's anywhere between 9-3 and 12-0. I mean, you never want to sleep on Nick Saban. That's not a great business to be in. But when's the last time Alabama had to replace a left tackle and a quarterback in the same year? And in a transition year from an identity standpoint on offense. They're trying to go back to the bully ball days of Alabama where they just lined up, and we call them middle finger runs. They could just line up and run it whenever they wanted and get whatever they wanted. Defensively, they would just Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, they had a monopoly on offensive and defensive linemen. And make no mistake, it is a quarterback in trenches league. It is a quarterback in trenches game. So when you look at where Alabama is right now in the quarterback battle, I think Ty Simpson's going to end up winning it, but we still don't know yet. There's some questions on whether they can get back to that dominant level up front. Because you look around the rest of the league, I mean, look at what LSU's bringing back. 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line, 2 NFL tackles. I think Will Campbell may end up being a top 5 pick before it's all said and done. They bring Jaden Daniels back. I love them getting Logan Diggs, adding him from Notre Dame in the backfield. And then you've got Malik Neighbors and the rest of the aliens they have running around out there wide. And that's not even talking about Mason Smith in the defense. So you look at Ole Miss. You look at Mississippi State, new system under Zach Arnett, which I think is going to benefit Will Rogers more. Some people look at me like I got 3 eyes when I say that, but I really think it's going to, and we can dive into that at some point. And then Arkansas, KJ Jefferson, Rocket Sanders, how will they be up front? Do they have enough pieces around them and enough depth on defense? And then Auburn with Hugh Freeze, man, and A&M, Bobby Petrino. So I say it's a long way of saying this. There are a lot more unknowns this year in the SEC West than there has been going into a season in a long time. And I think that's great for the conference. I think it's great for the division. And I do believe that lends itself to chaos, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I was just looking. I did a video the other day on, listen, quarterback's not the problem at Alabama. Your problem is offensive line depth. There's never been a time where Nick Saban's been like, okay, I've got a couple studs over here, but I really don't know who's going to be playing on this other side. And if one of those guys goes down, then we've got freshmen in the 2 deep. That's just not normal for Alabama.
And it's so hard, outside of quarterback, the transition from high school, starting as a freshman, in the trenches on the offensive line and the defensive line, that's the hardest spot to go in there and do it. Just because physically, look, old man strength is a real thing when it comes to the trenches. And Alabama's got a ton of talent. They just had the #1 rated recruiting class in the history of recruiting, whatever it was last year, depending on where you look. So the talent's there, but the experience, what we call the unteachable intangible, the experience is not there. And that's something that you can't put into somebody. They've got to go through it, and you go through ups and downs. So again, Alabama doesn't typically have to replace symbiotic positions. What do I mean? Left tackle, quarterback, middle linebacker, defensive end. There's a lot of things that Alabama's having to replace this year. Like I said earlier, while they're transitioning identity-wise, system-wise, and scheme-wise, going back to what they used to be. So, look, I know they play LSU at home. You do got to go on the road to Auburn. You get Texas at home week 2. I think that's going to be a great litmus test, not only for Alabama, but for Texas as well. So, yeah, I think Alabama, I don't want to say that I think that they're just going to be an average team because they have too many above-average players to be an average team. But I think they're going to be a little bit mortal. Achilles wasn't dipped in the water all the way, and that's what ended up getting them. I think it may be the whole leg this year for Alabama, though.
It is crazy. And you talked about, you listed all the quarterbacks out there. That's what makes me like the SEC West, even with Auburn naming Peyton Thorne as their starter. I think Peyton Thorne is a cool customer. He's a guy who's played big time football. He's going to bring some some calmness, I think, to Auburn a little bit in their system. But you have him, KJ Jefferson, Will Rogers, like you said, whoever it ends up, it could be either Jackson Dart or Spencer
Both with a ton of
Saunders.
experience, both very
Exactly.
experienced guys.
Who have played. Jaden Daniels. People crap a little bit on Jaden Daniels and saying he missed some deep shots last year or was afraid to pull the trigger. I'm like, guys, he didn't even know he was going to be the starter until right before into camp. Now he's had a whole off season for that rapport. I think year 1 to year 2, and you mentioned it with freshman linemen. They had 2 freshman tackles last year. How can you not think LSU is going to be better with Jaden Daniels year 2 and the tackles being experienced now?
Well, a couple things on there. Number one, and it's not just Jaden Daniels. I mean, you got Nussmeier right behind him. I think LSU, from a quarterback depth standpoint, it was huge having Nussmeier decide to stay. Because, again, he could have hopped in the transfer portal. He could have gone and been the guy somewhere. We know Jaden got a little beat up last year. We talked to him in SEC Media Days. He's a little bit thicker, but he's still not a thick guy. I mean, Jaden Daniels is not a big guy, and he does like to run. And I think, last year, and this is something that we've harped on. I've talked to Blue in the face about this. About halfway through the year, he was at 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. And somebody asked Brian Kelly, they're like, hey, man, how great is it that Jaden Daniels, he's not turning the ball over? And Brian Kelly said, listen, I don't want him to turn the ball over, but we're not getting a return on our investment because Jaden Daniels isn't utilizing the deep third of the field enough. Not that he'd never throw it, but he wasn't giving his receivers opportunities to go, look, if you're even, you're leaving. That's the rule at wide receiver. You got to let them go. Sometimes you got to throw the 50-50 ball and let them turn it into a 70-30 ball. And then all of a sudden,
got the dudes to get it.
He's got look at, I mean, it's like the Avengers when you look at LSU when it comes down to athleticism. There's a reason they can win national championships with one guy who ate grass and another guy that probably smoked it. There's a reason for that. They have unbelievable talent. But when you look at when Jaden started utilizing the deep third, it changed them offensively. How? Well, that first half of the year, every time it seemed like they ran it, there was 30 guys in the box. You want to know why? Because Jaden went and challenged him down the field. Every time he'd throw an intermediate route or a short game route, or he'd throw the screen, it was like 2 guys were hitting the receiver or the running back at once. They were, because everybody was creeped up. But once that started happening down the field, it opened up everything else. And I think a little bit of it was, don't forget, when he decided to go to LSU from Arizona State, what was the knock on Jaden Daniels? Well, he turns the ball over. He's lazy with the ball. He puts the ball up for grabs too much. And you can sit here and say, I'll block out the noise and don't listen to it. But I guarantee you, in those meeting rooms when he got there, and with Brian Kelly when he got there, they made sure and showed him that tape from Arizona State and said, if you do this in the SEC, we are going to get murdered. I don't care how talented we are around, because turnovers lead to losses. So I think there was a lot of it. Now he's comfortable. I think them getting rid of some of the prima donnas they had on last year's team, even though they won the SEC West. I love Malik Neighbors. I especially love Malik Neighbors on 3rd and 6. That's when I really love Malik Neighbors. But I'm telling you right now, where did LSU get worse? Where did they get worse? You lose Ojolari and Ali Gay off the edge, but you got some great guys in from the transfer portal. And the minute I worry about LSU's athleticism up front is the minute we all need to look up and see the asteroid that's about to hit Earth, because that's about the only way.
Exactly. So it sounds like we're on the same page in terms of LSU. I think is only going to get better, but the rest of the SEC West is definitely got weapons, and they've definitely got quarterback play and things like that. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch week in and week out.